Welcome everyone. Welcome to the session. It's nice to see actually a few familiar faces. So today's session is why most sustainable solutions fail and how to make sure yours doesn't. This time we tested a more attention-grabbing title, but essentially this session is about how to de-risk your innovation process as well as your product design process so you can create solutions that serve a proven need and most importantly, drive real systemic impact. So let's continue introductions. If you haven't already done so, feel free to put your name, company, and what you're working on in the chat. Feel free to also share any expectations that you have for this session. We had some really good questions already. How to embed sustainable design practices into design team processes so that they're not an afterthought or a retrospective activity. So that was a really good expectation, which I need to cover today. We also had a very good one, which is why very innovative solutions do not make it outside the lab and fail to be scalable. So this is really a good inspo for our webinar title today. Yeah, so feel free to keep going through the chat. A few points of order. So we are recording this webinar if you want to watch it again, and also for the benefit of people who might have missed it. At the end of this session, we will also invite you to book a free UX consultation with Joe. And we also sharing one of our latest guides, which is a customer discovery playbook. So more on this in a few minutes. Well, so let's do our own introductions. So I'll start. So I'm the co-founder and managing partner at the C Collective. I've been working in marketing and design for about 20 years, especially in international marketing, user experience, and sales. In blue chip companies, B2B, B2C. And the reason I founded the C Collective was to focus only on organizations with positive social and environmental impact. I also happen to be an environmental science educator, facilitating learning experiences on climate change, biodiversity, and also planetary boundaries, which is really dear to my heart. So I'm passionate about bringing people and planet-centered approaches to product design and marketing as well. And I will hand over to Joe, who is the real expert in the room in all things product design.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, I'm Joe. I've been working now just over 15 years, worked across different businesses, started in big corporates and agency side, and specializing in digital products and strategy and research. Worked with social enterprises and climate tech last 5 to 8 years. Wanted to make a difference, I suppose, and not work in the more corporate realm of just earning money, and help businesses to grow products, to build products, and release them to the market and help them understand what it is their potential users and customers and beneficiaries need and want. So yeah, I've been looking forward to hopefully giving you some nuggets of information that would be useful to take away from today's call.
Yeah, sure, there will be more than nuggets, hopefully. A few words about our organization, the C Collective. We're a UK-based consultancy operating from London, but working with clients around Europe and North America. We support entrepreneurs that are scaling sustainable and regenerative solutions through people and planet-centered design and marketing. And we also support leaders trying to transform their business for greater impact through our regenerative business design transformation services. So this session today, we're very excited about because it really brings together the 3 pillars of our work. The first pillar is really design, which revolves around strategy, user research, which we'll be talking about a lot today, UX, UI, and product design. The second is marketing strategy and operations. And last but not least, the regen activities that we've been launching. We launched in 2024. So we help business leaders through environmental awareness and regenerative business model design. And this is where we bring in tools such as planetary boundaries and donut economics. So now that intros are done, let's go into the content and the agenda first.
Thanks, Ray. So today we're going to discuss a bit the kind of problems as we see them, at least from a digital product and marketing point of view. And we discuss a bit how to address those problems in to your products, looking beyond just your users, looking at full system impact, and then discuss a bit more about planetary boundaries and how you can utilize that as a design lens in the full process, from idea generation to market. And then finally QA.
Great. So just a bit of a scoping the things that we're going to cover, the principles and examples we're covering today should be relevant to a lot of types of environmental solutions, or including data platforms. So if you're working in environmental monitoring, if you're working on carbon management, life cycle assessment, compliance platforms, or even like public engagement solutions for citizens and community tools, there is something for you in this session. But obviously what we're going to offer is not a one-size-fits-all. What will matter is really engaging with your users in the path to action, whether they're a climate scientist, a chief sustainability officer, or a concerned citizen.
Perfect. Thanks, Rich. So first, we just look at the problems being faced in the market. I think the last 25 years with different solutions being made for carbon offsets and various other topics in sustainability, it's safe to say there's been the research done the last 2 years showing that it's not been effective. The impact hasn't been there. For example, they say 87% of voluntary carbon offsets have carried a high risk of not meeting their emission reductions. There's been definitely investment collapse in the last 2 years, and 25 years kind of systemic failure, according to Oxford and Penn review, with 970 million tons of credits not really creating the impact. So we kind of want to look at, from our perspective, how we can improve or help people improve their products, to hopefully prevent that falling into the same trap of not creating the impact they need. In terms of the customer base, the awareness is not the bottleneck. People are concerned. People do want to make a difference, and a positive change in the world. For example, there's 54% of people are concerned or alarmed by climate change, but the concern there doesn't mean they're going to take action. Is one big problem. 69% of people will give 1% of their income to tackle climate change, according to a study in 2024. But in terms of actually stating that intention in a survey is very different to actually doing that. And then in terms of actual behaviour explained by stated intentions, only 18 to 28% is it. So the intention there is weak, predictor of what actually people will do. And it's really understanding business to help understand what it is their customer base will do and how to change their behaviour to take action, to drive ultimately a positive impact, is a key issue, not being aware there is a problem that we all need to tackle collectively. In terms of why we see innovation solutions that don't scale that well in reality, and from what we see in terms of basically climate tech, the failures are not technical. People can build fantastic solutions from a technical point of view, but it's much more in the commercial discovery phase that the failures are. And there's kind of three main elements to that. So one is a technical feasibility. It leads the decision making. So people rush to build a tech that works, but haven't actually understood if there's a market need there or if it's meeting an unmet need correctly. So perhaps they're in the right ballpark in terms of the solution, but they miss the target in terms of actually what people want, in terms of, and creating that positive outcome. Number two, in terms of discovery done with enthusiasts and not buyers. This is quite a common problem we see, that people say, I've run this pilot, it's been great, we've got some great feedback, and blah, blah, blah. And you drill into who's been in that pilot, and actually they tend to be people that have already brought into the solution before they've even been part of the pilot. And they're different to actual buyers who are coming in eventually. So when you then launch that to market, you don't see the uptake in buyers because you haven't fundamentally understood what's going to drive them to take up the solution. And then finally, it's never defined the outcome, and that's a big one we want to discuss today a bit further in terms of people don't actually understand what it is the outcome the user or customer of the solution wants to have in their life. So people don't come to use a solution; they come to get an outcome from that solution. And businesses tend to focus on their product and what it can do and the features, etc., and completely kind of miss the actual purpose of it, that delivering an outcome, and then trying to scale that widely to a bigger market. So ultimately, essentially, awareness without agency leads to helplessness, both from a business point of view and both from a customer point of view. If you don't feel like you can make a difference, even though you know there's a problem, you'll kind of lose hope in that sense. To compound, and not to make this too depressing or too quickly, the growing use of AI across especially digital products is worsening the problem. And it's very good at making ideas cheap, reducing the gap in terms of allowing people that don't have technical knowledge to create ideas and create proof of concepts. You can scale something very quickly in terms of technically, but what we see happening is they're scaling of bad products faster. And sustainable solutions are not separate from this. We see a lot of people in the market that are doing the same things, and they're not really doing the homework at the start to understand what it is they need to build, rather than launching straight into creating something because they can. This is backed up by some data, so anyone that can ship a sustainable solution now, or any solution now, from a technical point of view, so 92% of US developers are using AI coding tools daily, and that's a similar story in terms of business people that are using it as well daily, not necessarily to build, but in their thinking as well. And 40% of all new code is now generated by AI, according to GitHub. That's growing quite quickly in terms of that percentage. And there's a lot of people there that are delivering code that don't actually know what the code does. And it's very tempting to build fast and build a product, but the trap is the AI makes it easier. So then you end up spending longer building things that aren't going to deliver any positive outcomes for the users. So essentially, shipping is not impact. That's a very important measure here in terms of what we define as impact. So building something is the easy part now. Used to be the hardest part. So building something that creates measurable change is even harder than it was before. And 95% of enterprises now, AI deliver zero measurable impact, and that's holistically across all sectors. So not specifically for sustainability, but yeah, most AI projects don't work long term. So
and Joe,
yeah.
Sorry if I can just chip in.
Sure.
If you like feel you're in this situation, it's still okay. Because we do have a lot of clients that are coming to see us, and that they're at that stage. Oh, they were like, oh, I could build this amazing like water data solution in like a few months. I could have never done it without AI 5 years ago. But no, I don't know what to do with it. So it doesn't mean that if you're at that stage, it's game over. There is still a way forward, and this is what Joe is gonna explain.
Yes, thanks, Marie. Yeah, it's not terminal. It's not a terminal issue. You can come back from it, but yeah, it's just a trap that you can easily fall into. So let's talk about what impact actually means from a digital product point of view. And I think most teams we've encountered do kind of focus on the wrong measurements and call it impact. So from our definition, is a measurable impact is a measurable change in a real world behavior or outcome attributed to your product or service, and which is sustained over time. So what doesn't count as impact is sign-ups, downloads, account creation, anything that's conversion driven to your platform. Engagement and time on the platform doesn't count as impact. Any sentiment or brand recall in awareness phase, reports generated, carbon credits purchased, all that is metrics, but not impact. What counts as impact then is decisions changed, actions taken, or behaviors shifted due to your product or service that you're providing. measurable reduction in real world variable, whether that's emissions or others, sustained change in beyond the launch period. And so that's you can get an uptick quite quickly in the first few weeks and months, but making sure that's sustained across the full year, 2 years, 3 years, and then that they can be causally attributed to your product as well. So there's a very clear line between the product and the data you're serving potentially, and then the behavior change and the outcomes afterwards. And it's very verifiable by someone other than your team itself. So external stakeholders, external partners, users themselves, anyone that's not within your own team. Excuse me. In terms of the behavior gap, we feel is between data and action is a design problem. It's not a data problem. So a lot of the platforms we deal with and clients we deal with are delivering data essentially to their customers and users, and that's good. It's very much focused on it's a design challenge that you need to focus on rather than an infrastructure data challenge. So ultimately, the process here is the traditional process is you look at the tech side, the data you can gather, and physically how you deliver that, whether that's just purely digital or there's a mix of physical and digital elements to it, or maybe purely physical. And then you look at the how to deliver that, how to build it, and then you look at the customers and how to get them into that product, and then you look at improving, iterating from there. The flaw there is you often can take a long time to get somewhere that customers get to a point where you're delivering something customers need, and then it's slow to get customers to use the product and service. What we recommend is kind of flipping that logic and starting with the intended outcome that you want to your customers to achieve, and that's a measurable change in the real world that should occur by someone using your product or service. And starting with that sets the scene in terms of what it is you then need to build, what you need to deliver, and what actions the customer needs to do to achieve those outcomes. And that can be various things off platform, on platform. The scoping and mapping there should be quite wide, and you look at perhaps unintended consequences of the platform as well, which we'll come to later in a bit of sustainable UX. But you much more focus on then use the key user actions that drive that behavior change and that deliver that outcome. And then you can define, okay, what is the data strategy we need? What is the requirements we need for the platform? What are the features that we need to deliver those actions? And then finally, you can move into actually design, build, and actually delivering the product. The trap at the moment, as I said, with AI is you start the other end of the thing and you start visualizing very quickly and building very quickly, and you don't look at the intended outcome and actions until the very end of the process and discover then that it's not driving any behavioral change, not driving any measurable improvement, or perhaps not getting customers at all. So in terms of when I focus on the first chunk there, because also we've got limited time today, and probably the most important chunk is how to understand the outcomes that you want the customer wants from using your product or service. So here we separate this into 5 kind of factors, and if you can fill in all 5, then you can say you fully understand the outcomes, and you can move forward in terms of understand the actions that can deliver these outcomes. The 5 steps are who, so specific names, segments, everyone, outcomes nobody owns. So it should be a very specific target audience or user, and that's quite probably the easiest part of this. And then you want to understand what is the observable behavior that they will do that will change in terms of delivering that outcome. And then, so what is the real world consequence of them doing that behavior? What happens that produces an impact, and how much is then a quantifiable target? So if you can't measure it, it's not really an outcome. So you have to understand how to measure it, and then by when. It's a specific time zone horizon. So you give a very specific time to create that outcome. So the actions towards that become very clear in terms of what it is that needs to be achieved to ultimately create that outcome. So some examples here in terms of difference between, sorry, the pattern first. So yeah, that's the structure you can use. We use it in workshops. So who, will, does what. So that something happens and it's measured as how much by when. So you can use that as a framing quite easily. In terms of some examples here, in terms of aspirations versus outcomes, I think reason why we say aspirations is people get sometimes confused between the two, and that's understandable. But there's definitely a difference. So in terms of a scope-free emissions platform, an aspiration would be to help companies understand their supply chain carbon footprint. That's very much an inside-out, a business-focused thing rather than a customer-centric outcome. The outcome spec version of that will be sustainability managers at mid-market manufacturers will switch suppliers based on platform data so that their procurement decisions reduce supply chain emissions. And 80% of active users make at least one supply and switch decision within 90 days of activation. So very hyper-specific, time-based, and quantifiable measure there in terms of what the outcome you're trying to achieve or help your customers try and achieve here. Regenerative agriculture app example, so increase farmer awareness of soil health practices. It's aspirational, again, inside out. It doesn't give you a measurable thing, nor a time-based element to that. So the outcome spec here will be smallholder farmers, and our pilot region will adopt at least one cover crop practice so that topsoil carbon stocks measurably increase. So 6% of enrolled farmers in fencing on approximately at 20% of their land by the next planting season. So again, very actionable, measurable, specific. In terms of then the final one, the consumer sustainability app. So encourage users to live more sustainably, very generic, doesn't it's not actionable. The outcome spec there will be users who set a weekly food waste goal will reduce household waste so that the less organic waste enters a landfill, and 30% of average reduction in self-reported waste within 8 weeks sustained at 12 weeks. So again, specific, measurable, with a clear user base there. Moving forward, so in terms of if you got the outcome for your specific customer base or your specific users of your product or service, definitely the first step. The other steps there we're explaining later in the playbook, but that's the core one you need to get done first. A really important part of this process is to also map the unintended outcomes potentially, and that's measuring the impact, both positive and negative, on the wider system, environmental or social system that your product and service might touch or be dependent on. So we want to go on through a few ways where you can help map this and understand it a bit better to make sure that you're making a positive impact. So in terms of what we see from sustainability and climate entrepreneurs, obviously very passionate. We're all very passionate about making a positive change in the world. This can be a bit of a weakness as well, and it'll be very mindful that the passion can blind you to certain things. So, for example, we've got right and wrong mindset here in terms of discovery process. So would you like to use this product could be something you would ask someone. The right mindset is tell me about the last time you dealt with this problem and the problem that you're trying to deal with in your product and service. So you take it away from your product, your service, and frame it as a reality. And people are very bad at telling you what they might do. They're very good at telling you what they've done. So it's very fallible in terms of trying to get people to future project themselves into a scenario. There's a few more here. Pitching solution. Don't pitch your solution to them. Much more explore their reality in the discovery phase to understand what it is they're doing, what is the context, why they're doing something, why they're not doing something, and really understanding that fundamentally rather than just trying to push them to use your solution. And then people, the classic one is people often seek to positively validate their ideas. It's the black swan, white swan issue, and you should seek the truth rather than seeking validation. So often the easy way to do that is to seek invalidation of your ideas, and if you can't invalidate them, then you know it's the right conclusion to make. Talking less is important. So the classic is when you're doing discovery phases, just talking to potential customers or talking to use interviews with potential customers. You talk and you pitch more than you actually listen. So make sure you're listening 8% of the time and only talking 20%. And knowing what you need, what they need. See it's less, but it is a pitfall to fall into that if you've come from a specific market where you almost are the customer, you've been in their shoes, you fall into the trap of you think you know what they need. Now you do bring knowledge to the table, you do bring understanding to the table, but it's much better to try and take yourself out of that and understand much more what they need, and not trying to implement your biases onto them. It's probably the hardest one, but it's the biggest pitfall to fall into when you're starting a new business. So in terms of mapping and going beyond a bit users, what we recommend is also mapping your direct users, of course, but also what we call indirect human users and non-human users. Now, the purpose of doing this is to understand the wider impacts of potentially your product or service, especially if it has a physical element to it. So if you're tracking soil degradation or forest degradation, or you're looking at textile industry, there's lots of potential indirect users and indirect beneficiaries of your product or service. So direct users, obviously, people we discussed, they're people that directly using your product or service, and without them, you have no product or service, and no impact happens. So that's the starting point. The next one is then the indirect human personas, and these are people that are affected by your solution who don't directly use it. This could be supply chains, it could be downstream communities. If you're doing a forest management, it could be the people that live in forest nearby or the forest management employees. If it's could be affected workers if there's in the supply chain sort of slave labor potentially or child labor. And it's very important to understand as best you can where those indirect humans are and how they're affected. So to try and minimize unintended harm. It's not always possible to completely eradicate the harm, of course, because if they're in a very complex supply chain, you can't directly affect it, but it will then lead you to pick certain suppliers based on that harm. So much more on reducing the harm as much as you can. It stops you from creating another problem, or inflaming a problem that's already existing from your good intentions. And then the non-human one, which is the most challenging to map, but a very important one. And this is the natural systems, ecosystems, and the environmental resources affected by your solution. So it could be it's a forest management tool or monitoring tool, then perhaps it's the trees. You can break that down to different types of trees. It's the animals that live in the forest. It's the soil itself. So you really try and map and understand the harm or the positive impact you're trying to make on those non-human entities to ensure true sustainability and making sure that the awareness of the ecological cost is built into your full thinking and built to your decision making. There's some concrete examples of these. So indirect human stakeholders could be, if it's an electronics product, it could be a child in the DRC who's mining cobalt for batteries that are using the product. If it's fast fashion, it could be garment workers in Bangladesh whose conditions in the factories are poor. It could be food delivery platform. It could be the restaurant workers or riders that are navigating demands. Carbon offset marketplace could be the indigenous communities whose land hosts offset projects. Solar panel manufacturer could be workers near rare earth mining and processing facilities. Could be the fields that they're being placed into. If it's for non-human stakeholders, the carbon emitting services is forests absorbing CO2, named ecosystem like the Amazon basin. Water intensive product could be the local watershed, depletion rates, downstream habitat effects. For plastic manufacturing, if there's any plastic manufacturing in your product or service, it's the marine ecosystem, for example, microplastics, accumulation species, or it could be people that are ingesting plastic or getting caught in plastic. Agricultural tech, topsoil health, pollinator populations, good old bees, regional biodiversity as well. It's important to map. And then data center services, so local environment, water for cooling, and land use, energy grid impact. It's quite difficult to do effectively. Marie will come on to how planetary boundaries can help with that. We'll come to a bit later. There is a solution there to help with that. And focusing them on the non-human personas, which is the more difficult one. The structure we kind of look at to use is not to anthropomorphize data at all. It's not to make them a human, but making the ecological costs and concrete enough. So you name and identify them. So if it's a aquifer, if it's groundwater, so be specific. If it's a tree, name the type of tree, different species of tree. Be very as specific as you can be. You can always start more general if you're new to it, and then get more specific. But definitely try and be as specific as you can. So then make a connection to your product. So how is the system linked to your supply chain or product life cycle? And make that concrete. And then what's the current state of the health system, of this health system, not the NHS. What are the vital signs of, and how's it measured? Then the vulnerabilities and thresholds. So what are the tipping points? What happens if it degrades further? That's where definitely planetary boundaries comes in later. And regenerative capability. Is it system? Can we recover the system? How can we help that? What's the under what conditions does it improve? What would help it thrive? And how the product is or service is affecting that. And then finally, the design implications. So this all feeds into then product decisions, service decisions, and how to reduce harm or actively support the regeneration of those systems. Work in the discovery phase, fully mapping out the full outcomes, positive outcomes for your customers, for your users, but also the outcomes for things wider than just the immediate product and service and the people using it, but actually the social and environmental impacts. And that will give you the foundation to make correct decisions. In terms of common failure modes we see and how to design around them, we mentioned once already the passion. So passion can be blind you to what actually users need, especially if you come from a place where you think you've been in your customer's shoes. The simple fix there: interview them, learn, and don't look to validate, look to learn, look to understand the context, and not to just pitch your solution. Then failure number 2 is designing for your customer, but miss everyone else affected. So that's the non-human and human personas. Make sure that they're mapped as well, so you fully understand the outcomes holistically as best you can. Then failure number 3 is you optimize for adoption and you focus on growth at all costs, and you create unintended harm. And that's where the planetary boundaries can really help, which Maria will talk about a bit later. And then failure number 4 is your validation tells you what people say, not what they do. So make sure there's commitment hierarchy and you're focusing on true behavior. Finally, how to embed this into your processes. So number 1 is change the discovery templates. So make sure you add in those non-human and indirect human personas into your standard persona deliverables. Make sure it's part of the discovery process. Or if you've gone past that, you've got a product, make sure you go back and relook at it. You don't need to do just the start, and if you haven't done it, then you're lost. You can always come back and do it again, and make them as specific as you can. Number 2, make the outcome mandatory. So that if they're so and how much, make that standard in terms of how you brief or you think about your next features or service adaptations and improvements. Make sure that becomes a core component of what how you spec and prioritize features. And then finally, using planetary boundaries as a design lens, which Marie is going to explain a bit more about.
Yes, thanks, Joe. Yes, so let's talk about into more details about how you can use other frameworks such as planetary boundaries and social and donut economics to really extend your design powers and toolkits. Because when you think about it, if you look at the way product design and UX was done in the traditional way, it's only focusing on human users. So back to Joe's point of introducing other types of personas, the traditional way, and this is what most people still do, is just focusing on human desirability. It's about growth and at any cost, which means that the pain you will remove for a particular user might be moved somewhere else. So end up with another partner, person, or place. So this is why we believe that the design toolbox needs to be expanded, and we need to sit into a new paradigm. And this is where we bring in nature as another dimension to our design, so that it is systemic. And this is why we call it the regenerative design. So in the context of our systemic design model, having just like product market fit, for instance, is not good enough. So another model that is relevant to, or is even like an extension of what Joe was talking about in terms of indirect human personas and non-human personas, is going to be using planetary boundaries, and then the other aspect of donut economics, which is the looking into social needs. So is anybody not familiar with planetary boundaries? You can say, you can just lift your hand, raise your hand. Okay, so I'll go quickly. So the planetary boundaries were introduced by the Stockholm Resilience Center, led by Johan Rockström in 2009, so not so long ago. And they represent a framework that identifies the 9 key Earth system processes that regulate the planet's stability, that keep it livable for many species, including ourselves. Do you know what planetary boundaries do you know? Maybe just put the ones that you know in the chat. There's some really obvious ones, and then some less obvious ones. Okay, Max, what do we have? Okay. Yes, ocean acidification, biodiversity, freshwater. Yes, any other suggestions? There's some more, even like one more, which is super well known. We talk about it all the time. Okay, Max, thank you for chipping in. Any other suggestions on planetary boundaries? Guesses? Yeah, greenhouse gases. Yeah, so climate change. So planetary greenhouse gases is actually more like the variable, one of the variables that help measure, well, the climate change, or one of the causes. But what's interesting to Joe's point is that the 9 planetary boundaries, and you have them all here, can be different aspects that can guide your process of identifying your impact, identifying non-human personas. So the planetary boundaries that we haven't mentioned are novel entities. So it's anything that was created by humans, such as GMOs, PFAS, and other interesting but usually indestructible products from the petrochemical industry. Ozone depletion, that's one of the 2 planetary boundaries that is still okay, and it's actually recovering. Atmospheric aerosol loading is the air pollution. Ocean acidification, so we've covered it. Biogeochemical flows, that's another one. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. That's the phosphate and nitrates flows. Freshwater, yes, we've covered it. And then you have land systems change and biodiversity integrity. So we have 7 out of 9 boundaries that are crossed at this time, which means that the current way we design our products or solution is just not good enough, which means that we need to be extra careful at understanding the impact that we create, and also definitely change the models of design that are totally outdated and even dangerous. So we need to we can't just design for convenience, or aesthetics, we need to design for actively regenerating and restoring our ecosystems. And so this is where this is a really good tool for strategy. So another tool that is inspired by planetary boundaries is donut economics. Anybody has read the book or seen the TED Talks by Kate Raworth? So the donut economics is a framework coming from economist Kate Raworth, and it maps the safe and just space where humanity should operate. So the outer ring is the planetary boundaries, and then the inner ring is the social needs. So making sure that every person gets access to food, health, housing, equity, education, fair jobs, and so forth. So this is extremely important to look into this when you're looking at indirect human personas, to make sure that there's no shortage of social foundations in your supply chain. So again, why this is a super interesting framework is that basically it gives us a space where we should be designing for. So this is what we call the safe space. So back to what Joe was saying around the questions you should be asking yourself to create your personas. You can also use the donut economics mapping as a very good activity to answer a lot of questions, such as what are my positive impacts at the moment? What else do I want to achieve? What are the negative impacts I have on planetary boundaries? What are the risks to my business as well? So that's extremely important question to ask. And what essential social needs should be fulfilled all through my value chain, and what are the opportunities for change, and also how do all these risks and opportunity evolve over time. So this is a really interesting collaborative tool for workshopping and discussing with your colleagues and stakeholders to align on what type of impact you want to make.
Yes, so in terms of concretely how to use this, particularly in the discovery phase, if you're doing user research or customer research. So one example is so what problems does the user face? Kind of a classic question that you're trying to answer during user research. The planetary boundary ask there is what environmental pressures does solving this problem create? So you ask both questions, you investigate both questions at the same time. Another example is what does the user value? And then the planetary boundary ask there is which Earth systems are affected by delivering that value. So there's always a counter looking at the social environmental impact to any kind of research question. And you can do that for lots of different research questions and make sure that you're matching that to the planetary boundaries. And that builds in then from the start, or at least from as soon as you're doing any new piece of work, that lens that you're making sure that you're always creating positive impact or reducing harm, and as Marie said, reducing risk for your business.
Right. So just to finish this by an example, essentially there's no simple answers to the complex problems we're being faced with today. So as a product designer, product owner, business owner or designer, you need to embrace the complexity of the world we live in and the problems that you're tackling, and to be prepared to reframe the problems, challenge the data that needs to be measured, or even the reason to be of your organization, just like in this example. So let's say the challenge you have to tackle is your country needs to have farmers plant more trees to fight climate change and biodiversity loss. So if you look at this problem with a traditional design lens, the question could be like, okay, let's find easier ways for farmers to plant trees. And so the data you need for that is pretty straightforward. So it'll be trees, biomass, and carbon, because the solution is a monospecific forests planting. But if you look at the problem with a regenerative approach, the question might be, how can we design agricultural landscapes that are using methods that benefit both farmers' health and financial resilience, that benefit soil health, biodiversity, crop yields, and even climate resilience? So here, the solution you need is going to be regenerative agriculture or agroforestry, which is one of the options. And so the data you need is much bigger and broader. So you probably need photosynthetic activity, soil carbon, biodiversity, crop yield, chemical pollution, people's health, and so forth. So at the end of the day, you can combine both the traditional product design or UX and the regenerative design practices to assess whether your innovation, whatever you're working on, has this net positive and social and environmental impact and really helps create resilience and therefore is worth designing or building for people and planet.
Cool. Thanks, Ray. And then finally, to leave you with some things you take away for your planning session. So you're next looking at a product decision or service decision and trying to prioritize different things to do. I want to give you kind of 7 questions to ask yourself when you're going through the process. The first one is, which 2 to 4 boundaries are most relevant to my solution? Of course, we advise looking at all the boundaries, but sometimes it's easier just to start with a few just to get you kind of used to the process and used to thinking and not be overwhelmed. So yeah, focus on maybe 2 to 4 and see what's most relevant. For each of those boundaries, what is your solution's current impact on them? And just have a think through on that, try and get as much data as you can. If you can scale then 100x or 10x or 50x, whatever it makes sense to you, does the impact stay within safe limits or does it get worse? Are you creating more negative impact as you grow? And then have you connected, or have I connected my non-human personas to specific boundaries? Have you created non-human personas? Maybe look at doing so if you haven't, and then connect those to those boundaries that you want to focus on. Then am I measuring the boundary relevant metrics? So how do you, and can you measure those metrics? Are you able to, or do you need to go and find out how to do that? And not just on maybe product metrics, user metrics in a classical way. Does our business model depend on exceeding any boundary? So looking at de-risking your business and understanding how you can really reduce the negative impacts. And then finally, what design changes would reduce pressure on cross boundaries. That could be looking at different suppliers, it could be looking at different integrations, etc. Finally, we have a bigger customer discovery playbook, which goes into some of these in more details and has a few more things than what we discussed in the time we had today. We're going to send everyone a copy of that on email, and there's a kind of a link there as well to look at it. So I think Marie's going to send that to everyone as a thank you for attending, and hopefully add more information there and some more frameworks that you can use to help in the process.
So that you are more than welcome to book a consultation with Joe if you have a specific question or project that you want to discuss. So you've got the link in the chat, and we'll send that in the wrap-up email. And then, yeah, I'll just then leave you with a quote. So if you have the power to design anything, you have the responsibility to design it within the donut. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you around on social media, LinkedIn, or in person. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.